In this video series, I'm going to show you how to create mods and total conversions for Eduke32. Download 7-zip for extracting zip files. Download GIMP for editing graphics. Download Audacity for editing sound files. Download Notepad++ for editing scripts or code files, .conn files. Any text editor can edit those files, but you want a text editor that allows you to see the line number for the line that the code exists on, so that you can track down errors. Find a suitable location on your hard drive and create a Workstation folder. Inside the Workstation folder, create a folder named Tools and a folder named Eduke32. Download Eduke32, choose the one for your operating system, save it to your Workstation folder. Go to the Eduke32 wiki, utilities page, under data files, under the group files section, download Group Files Studio, save it to your tools folder. Use the link in the description to jump to this webpage and download the build art files editor and save it to your tools location. Go to your tools folder, extract with 7-zip both applications to their own folders. Rename GFS31 to Group Files Studio, or rename BAFED to Edit Art. On the Eduke32 homepage, you can find Installation and Configuration Guide. This will help you find where your Duke3D GRP file is at. You will need the Duke3D GRP file. Find where it's located on your computer, move that to your Eduke32 folder. Go to your Workstation folder, open Eduke32, extract the Eduke32 exe to the Eduke32 folder. Now go to your Eduke32 folder, and you can launch Eduke32. The game just needs the .group file, .grp, that contains all of the game's assets, all of the graphics, all of the sounds, all of the maps. That's basically the core of the game's files. The Eduke32 exe is the engine behind it that runs all of that content, all the programming that makes everything happen. There's also some conn files inside of the Eduke32 group file. Those conn files are what allow Duke Nukem 3D to have custom content. The other build engine games didn't include conn files unless they were derived from Duke Nukem 3D, like Redneck Redemption. I'm going to set my resolution a little lower, and I'm going to set non-full screen. I'm going to launch the game, see if everything's working, and there we have it. The game launches. Now we want to extract the group file. Go to your tools, Group File Studio, launch Group File Studio. Back in the Eduke32 folder, drag your duke3d.grp onto your Group File Studio window. This is a list of all of the files that exist in the group file. You got animation files, these are your movies, the introduction sequence, the logo that first launches. You got your art files, .art. These are all of the graphics in the game, all of the enemy sprites, all of the textures. Each art tile contains 256, can contain up to 256 images. The conn files, these are the Duke Nukem 3D specific files that allow Duke Nukem 3D to have custom content. This contains the information for the enemy actors and how they react, and some of the sprites that you can shoot and break into pieces. Anything that has code attached to it is done through a conn file. .dat files have to do with the palettes the game uses. The demo files are just the demos that play in the background when you launch the game. Maps, these are all your map files for episodes 1, 2, 3, and 4. Miscellaneous, I don't know anything about those. Music files, MIDIs, these are the music for the game, obviously. And then sound files, .voc or .wave. Originally it just used all .voc. More sound files are available now. You can use more than just .voc and .wave. You can use .ogg, I believe is the preferred format. And that's everything in there. Control A will extract all. Yes for the warning. It's just letting you know it's extracting everything. You want to extract to your workstation. You want to extract to Eduke32. We need to create a new folder in the Eduke32 folder called Duke3D _ grp. Now back in the group file studio, we want to extract to that folder. And that's everything we'll be using Groups File Studio for. There's no reason to use group files anymore. They're basically obsolete. And currently you would just use a directory structure, or you can put them in a zip file, or there are many ways to finalize your project. But during the portion of time where you're working on your project, it's easiest just to work directly from a directory structure. So now the group file itself doesn't contain any directory structures. The group file studio separated them by extension, so it knew how to organize them. So what we're going to do first is we're going to organize these all into their separate folders, and then I'm going to show you how to make the actual game still know where their location is. Because if you just move them into separate folders right now, the game won't know where to find its assets. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the con files. The .con files is a control file, is what they are. That's what con stands for, is control. These control files allow the exe to interface with all of the graphical assets, maps, sounds, music. Like I said before, the Eduke32 is the engine, and the group file is the game itself and all of its graphical assets. So the way the exe calls up these con files is through the game.con, and then the game.con itself includes the defs.con and the user.con. So when you launch the exe, the first thing it's going to do is read game.con and only game.con. It's not looking for any other con files. And the game.con is telling it where to look for, or that it needs to look for these two other con files, and that's how they are included. Now, the order of things in the con file is important because you have to state certain information before another piece of code can recall that information. A piece of code can't recall information that exists after it. It can only recall information that exists before it. So these includes, let me open all of these files real quick. You can see them all up here. I'm going to organize these in the order that the game will actually read them. So it's defs, user, and then the game. Because we can see they include defs, include users, and then the game's going to read all of this files, all the information of this file itself. So in your head, you could just imagine that these locations right here where it says include user and include def, you could literally just take the code from defs.con, remove it, save that so it's empty, and place it over top this. Remove the defs.con and place all of that code that we have in that other thing. I'll explain how that code works that we're seeing here that I'm scrolling through. But you can place all that code right here, all in the game file, and save it. And now it's no longer in the defs.con. It's directly in the game.con. The game.con is no longer including that file. It just has that file's information in it. So the game would be perfectly fine running this way, as long as all of this information I just put there is in the right order. So the same goes for user.con. All the information in the user.con is basically, from the game's perspective, it exists right here. That's what the include is doing. You can include your own con files by just typing include. They can contain any code you want. Again, it's just important to have them in the right order. So what we're going to do over here, go into your Duke3D, Eduke32 folder, your Duke3D GRP subfolder we created, and create a new folder there called sounds. Now scroll down to where you find all the sound files and select the last of the sound files, and then scroll to the top and holding shift select the very top of the sound files. You'll have them all selected, and then you want to drag and drop them into the folder. It'd be slow if I try to go up here to find that folder, so let's just find it in our directory tree over here instead, directly into the sounds folder. So now all those files are our sounds folder. So now the interface between the game and these sound files we just moved is in the user.con here. They're actually right here where they're on the bottom. The very end of the user.con includes all of the sounds. Now, right here we can see this is the beginning of the sounds, beginning at line 450, right there. This gives you a little information. This is a little comment. If you see this little symbol here and that one there, that means that everything between those two things is commented, all of these lines. If you see just the double slash like this means that it's commenting just this line. And so any of these lines, if a double slash in front of them, the game is not going to read this line. It's not going to act like that's code. It's going to ignore it. And that's how comments work if you don't know about comments and programming yet. So here we have define sound, and then the name of the sound that the game.con is going to use when it tries to call the sound effect up. And then the actual sound file itself. Now this is actually a directory structure location. Now the directory structure isn't there, it's just the file, and that means that it's only looking for the file in this directory that exists. I believe it's just with the con files. Or I guess potentially in the same directory that the exe resides in. So for these for your sounds for the game to find the sounds now, we have to add this directory structure to them. So you just have to add, it's in Duke3D GRP, but that's where all this is. And we moved it to sounds, so we need to add that in front of this. So you just add sounds and a slash for the directory structure. And then you have to add that in front of every sound now. So the easiest way to accomplish this is to select your sounds with a slash and Control C to copy that, and now you paste it in front of them. But it would be time consuming to paste it one at a time in front of them, so make sure there's no spaces in between it. To speed it up, what you can do is you can select lines through the column. So normally if you hold shift and select another line lower down, it's going to try to select all of the text in between that. But because we're using Notepad++, you could hold shift and alt, and you can select directly down the column. Now, if we hit Control V now, it's going to paste what we have copied in our clipboard in front of all of those. And so you can quickly paste it in front of most things, unless it's obstructed like that. And so this is a much more rapid way of adding this to the front of all your sound files. Now that we've completed that, go ahead and save the file and launch the game. Make sure all the sounds are actually working and that you didn't make any mistakes. Everything sounds good. Now I'm going to take a moment to explain how define sounds, the name of the sound, and the sound file are all combined. Under the defs file, there are defines for the slot the engine has for sounds. So each sound needs a number attached to it so that the Eduke32 exe can know what slot that sound exists in. So the defines define the name to a number, so that when the engine reads this word string, it actually considers it as if it's this number. So if you look at a pistol fire is slot number 3, So it's defined pistol fire. So if we hunt for pistol fire in our user.con here, let's scroll above all the sound files so that when we do a search, it can search below and find the one we're looking for. And Control F for find. We're finding pistol fire. Find next. And there's define sound, pistol fire. It's the third one in this list here, and it's also fourth one in this list here, starting at 0, but fourth down. It's the third sound in the engine's sound slot. So in the game.con, when your code wants to play a sound effect, it uses its sound and then this word string, pistol fire. And so the game knows that pistol fire is slot number 3, the sound that is in slot number 3. And the user.con is telling it that the pistol fire, whatever's defined as pistol fire over here, which is in slot number 3, is using this sound effect. So the way pistol1.voc gets played for game.con when it calls sound pistol fire is because the defs here has defined the word phrase pistol fire as sound slot number 3, and the user.con has defined a sound for the word phrase pistol fire as being this sound file in this location. And that's how they combine to allow it to know where your sound is and play it. And that's how this word string that is defined in the defs.con is used in the user.con to combine that sound slot number 3 with the sound file pistol1.voc. It is actually possible to skip the step of defining a word string to the actual engine location where the sound would exist. If you were to comment this out and you were to directly define the sound instead of to this number, just this word phrase, to the actual number string that the engine's going to use for that, number 3, slot number 3 for a sound effect, then the engine will it'll put a sound in slot number 3, and that sound will be pistol1.voc. But if you were to do that in your game.con, instead of using this phrase sound to search for a sound, and then using the phrase that the sound is called, you'd have to use the number, because you never defined a phrase to that. So it would be difficult in your code to know what's going on later on. If you came back to code you'd made, you wouldn't know what sound is exactly playing because there's no word attached to that sound. The point in defining a word phrase to this number here is so that when you're programming, you're not just seeing a bunch of numbers, because you couldn't define what this sound is by just number 3. It'd be hard to remember down the line that number 3 is always the pistol sound. So that's the purpose of making these defines, is so that you're not dealing with numbers in your programming. You're dealing with words that you can associate with meaning to what sound effect is playing. So you technically don't have to create defines to name your sound effects and put them on a different slot. You could just directly do a define sound, and then the engine slot you want that sound to exist in, and then the sound file you want to exist there. It would just make it more difficult to keep track of what sound is playing whenever you're actually programming things. I was a little redundant with my phrasing there, but when I was first learning all of this, it took me a little while to quite understand the association between the defines, the sound effects themselves, and when they're being used. Now we're going to make a music folder and move all of the MIDI files there, the music files. And then go back to your text editor and to user.con, and right above your defines for all the sounds, you'll have music defines. Music 0, these are, as it says right here, for the title. And then the rest of these are for the individual levels. Music 1 is for Act 1, Music 2 is for Act 2, 3, and 4. The MIDIs are separated by level 1, level 2. It'd be easier to view them like this, so you might want to make them each their own individual line here. Because in a second we're going to be adding / music in front of all of these so that you can find their location again. Okay, now that I have those formatted, you just want to add your / music in front of it, and then hold Shift and Alt again. After copying the music / paste that in front of all of the MIDI files for each of the different episodes. And test the game real quick, make sure that worked. And yep, I can hear music, so it should be good. Because music is also sound effects, might as well put our music under our sounds folder. So now you have it under 2 subfolders, a sounds folder and a music folder. So put sounds / in front of the music / you have, and using Shift and Alt again, go ahead and add that in front of all of them. And now your music will also be in your sounds directory. So we'll keep everything nice and organized this way. There we go, save that and it should be fine. Some of the steps I'm taking aren't exactly necessary, but it would be my personal preference when making a total conversion or mods, just to keep things highly organized. So, under your Eduke32 grp folder, create a new text file, make it a .con file, and name it sounds. Hit yes for changing the extension. Now what we want to do is we want to copy all of this, the music that we just changed, all the way down to the bottom of the file, all the defined sounds. Copy that text and remove it from the user.con. Open your sounds.con and paste that text in there and save that. Now back in your user.con, type include sounds.con and save it. So now the sounds.con will be loaded at this location where the sounds previously were. Now also put this sounds.con file in the sounds folder and add the folder structure in front of this. So you're going to want to add sounds with a / there so that it knows it's in that subfolder. Now because this subfolder actually has all of our loose sound effects in it, our Vox and stuff, and now it has our sound.con in it, we want to actually organize those a little better too. We don't want those both in the same folder. So we're going to make a new folder here called sounds. And we're going to put all of these Vox in that folder actually. Right there, just hit Control A to select everything and then hold the Control key to deselect the few things I didn't want to selected. Now drop those there. Now we need to go to the sounds.con. We'll have to reload it. And what we want to do is we need to add that second structure to them. They need to be in another subfolder here. So what we'll do is to make this happen quick is you go to replace. We're going to put the one sounds and then we're going to put sounds and then sounds in the subfolder. And now find next and replace. If you hit replace all, so to replace even these ones up here we have in a subfolder and make them in a subfolder too, like that. We don't want that. So I'll Control Z and undo that. So what you just want to do is go right here and just hit find next and hit replace, and just use your enter key to do it real fast, and just hold the enter key, and it's just gonna replace sounds with the other sounds, and so you'll have it in that subfolder real quick. So that right there will make quick work of formatting that, and right there about to the end of the file. And make sure not to go past the end of the file, otherwise you'll end up formatting one of your sound effects into its subfolder. And hit save, and that's that. Now our sounds are in their subfolder. Sounds, so that should do fine. And now our sounds.con is easily accessible in our sounds folder, and then from there we could add or edit the original music or add our own music in there. Each one of these, music 1 corresponds to, like I said before, episode or act 1, and in each of the maps in order. So if you wanted to replace the music for level 1 on episode 1, you'd replace this file or so forth. And so that's the way I prefer to keep things organized, so that you can get direct access to whatever you want without having to actually have that information in the user.con, other than having it included there. Now also, this include in the user.con, it doesn't have to be there in the user.con. We could remove that, and we could add that directly to the game.con. The important point is that if you did that here, you'd still have to make sure that it's above all of this information here, because this information down here is trying to call up those sounds. So these sounds have to be defined before the game code can actually use these sounds. So that's the only important thing, is if you start reorganizing your user.con or your def.con and stuff, you have to make sure to keep things in the right order so that everything still flows properly. Also, like I mentioned before, the defs.con here defines a lot of these sound effects to slots. We are going to add and copy all of that and paste that information, remove it from the defs.con, and paste that in the sounds.con. But remember, this has to be above the code right here for sounds, because these ones right here are defining the name to a number, and these right here are recalling those defined sounds and using that name so that the engine could attach the sound effect to the number that it's defined to that name. And so now we have a independent sound file containing all of the music locations, it defines for the sounds slot, and the actual defines for the sound that is being attached to that slot, all in one file. Right above where all those sound effects were defined in the user.con, we have a define level name for all the levels. We can move the levels into their own maps folder. We just have to add that folder structure here in front of all the maps. So use Shift and Alt just as before, select down the column and add maps. And make sure to move your maps into that folder. Foolish me, I just realized that as I've been testing to see if my edits have been working and I haven't caused any problems, I haven't been using the custom game content directory. So it's possible I had run into some errors or problems as I was editing things. Probably not, though. Now I'm actually loading the custom game content directory here, so the edits I've made to the Eduke32 GRP folder will actually be launched when I launch the game. And look there, we do have an error compiling the con file. I misspelled the word include somewhere, so that's game.con line 32. So see, I had made a mistake. I'm glad I caught that. And what, I misspelled that? Ah, it was capitalized. Okay, see, just a simple miscapitalization, and we're having a problem there. Okay, that's saved. Start. The game's launching. There we go. Okay, so that was a great example of the simple mistake that could cause a crash and how to correct it. Okay, now that we've moved all the maps, let's go ahead and change the volume names to something generic. Episode 1, 2, 3, and 4 will be fine for that. Okay, and let's make the skill names generic as well. Let's save that, test it in the game real quick. And there we go. User map is hard-coded in the exe to show up here, so Eduke32 might have some custom con commands we could use to disable that, but for now, we'll just have to leave it there. Then if we go to that, easy, medium, normal, hard, we've got our skill name titles there. And so we could also change the name of the maps, the first map being named Hollywood Holocaust. That's down here. You can see Hollywood Holocaust right there. So that's where you change the actual level names. Let's go ahead and remove all but the first level of each act. So you just remove them like that. Obviously, adding new levels. Define volume name 0 is episode 1, 0 for the first map, and then as we noticed earlier, the directory structure for the map's location, and then the name of the map. This is the par time and 3-year realms time. So this is, how fast you should be able to complete the map if you're reasonably good, and this is how fast the experts completed the map, basically. So we're going to go ahead and remove all of the maps except for the first of each act, or episode, as they're called. Let's save that. No reason to load it. It should work fine in the game. Later we can actually go and edit the maps themselves. Also, since we don't really have an Act 2, 3, and 4, since we're making a total conversion and we'll be starting with Act 1, we'll go ahead and just comment those out. Now, let's launch the game and test our edits. And you'll see that new game, there's only episode 1 now. Still all the difficulties, but there will only be one level. Still the first levels. And so now we're well on our way to creating an environment for total conversion. Let's also go ahead and give that first level a generic name. And test that real quick. No reason, but I like to test things just about every time I change something. And level 1. Okay, let's create a new folder. Name it cons. In that folder, create a new file, text document. Make it a .con file. Name it episode slash, we can't do slashes, underscore skill underscore level. Yes, to change the extension. Open that. Move the code right here for our levels, defining the skill, and defining the volumes. Remove that from the user.con, go ahead and save. Put that in your episode skill and levels level.con. That's where we'll keep that stuff from now on. Make sure we name it properly. Episode. Now we're going to move over to our game.con, and we're going to include that. We're going to include cons slash, I'm just going to go ahead and copy the name of this and paste it. .con, and there now our episode skill and levels will now be stored in this location. When we want to add or change to that, we can go ahead and do it from there. And this right here is making sure that the code is actually launching. Let's double check and make sure everything's working. Yep. Okay. Now in your cons folder, create a new text document, .con, name it quotes. Now select all of the text in your user.con that was above the volumes and levels, all the way up to right here where it says max quotes. Copy all that and remove it from the user.con. Open your quotes.con, paste and save that, and then go to your game.con and include your quotes.con. Now we have those separate. The quotes are what it shows in the top of the screen whenever things go on, like auto aiming and stuff. You launch the game. Quotes, they're everything that shows up at the top of the screen, like ammo for pistol. We could find that in this list here. You'll find ammo for pistol and everything else that happens for quotes. So the quotes are called up in the game.con. You'll just type quote and then the number, and then the game, when it reads that number, it'll just type that text out on the screen for you. So this is quote 37. And so if we go to quotes and look at 37 down here, we'll see it'll say steroids on the screen. As we can see in the game.con, this is the actor steroids. So for the steroids you see laying on the ground, this is the code that makes them work, and this is the code right here that tells you picked up steroids. Again, it's important if you are rearranging things like I am right here, that the quotes.con now has to be somewhere in the code loaded before any of the code actually tries to use one of those quotes, or the game will crash. So if I took this include quotes.con and tried to add that to the bottom of this game file right here, this game.con, it'll cause it to crash because it doesn't know any of those quotes. It's going to crash for every line where it's trying to pull up a quote. So you just want to make sure you include stuff in the right order. It wouldn't matter what order it is within these up here, because the only place any of these quotes are being called is somewhere down in the game.con. There are no quotes being used in the defs or user or any of these other cons that we've created ourselves. This is all the organization that we need to do to the user.con. Everything else that exists up here, we can leave in the user.con for now. Most of this is just defining strengths for the enemies and stuff. The purpose for the enemy's strengths being defined right here in this location is so that in the game.con, for like the pig cop strength being 100, if we search for that string pig cop strength, we'll find that the actor pig cop uses the pig cop strength. This is the portion of code that's defining the pig cop actor. If I scroll up, you will find that the actions for pig cop are right here. The actions is the actual line of code that is attaching the graphics from the art files to the actor code that's present down here. I'll explain that further later whenever I get into how to create new actors. So right here where it's pig cop strength, you can see that pig cop strength is being used multiple times for each variation of this pig cop actor. The pig cop actor has a version where he's diving down on the ground, so he's already crouched, so you turn a corner and he's already laying down. That's this version. There's one that stays put, so he can't leave the sector he's spawned in, and then there's one right here, just the regular pig cop. They're all using the same pig cop strength value, and so if you go here to the user.con and change the pig cop strength from 100 to a different value, this will change the strength for all the variations of the pig cop at the same time. So that's the main purpose of defining pig cop strength in a different location than the actual, like, you could use the number value here. You could just have used 100 for the pig cop on all of these, But if you used 100 for each of those, and now the pig hop strength is 100, as he's supposed to be, but if you wanted to change all of these pig hop strength at the same time, you'd have to go to each individual line here. Well, because they're defined to pig hop strength, you could just go to the user.con and change the one instance of pig hop strength, changes his health from 100 to 150. And so now this is going to just change the value for all of these pig hops together. So by utilizing the define here, you can create a string with a number attached to it, and then use that string multiple times. And then when you change the value here to whatever you want it to be, it'll then change for each actor using that string. The actor will think that what is here is the number that is right here. And that allows you to change multiple versions of the actor's health simultaneously. And so that's the usefulness in defining the pig hop strength here. This value has to be defined above the location where the pig hop actor is recalling that. Just like I've told you before, whenever rearranging this code in the con, you'd have to keep it in order. So you could have this define saved directly above the actor's code right here, and this is the only actor that's going to be calling up pig hop strength, and this is the only 4 times it's using it, these 3 for the actor, and then this once down here for when the actor respawns on the hardest difficulty. But having that value here kind of defeats the purpose of it existing in a location where you could easily access all the actor's health values and change them for all the versions of the actor simultaneously. This just gives you a centralized location where you can see the health of all the actors and know that when you change the health for the Liz Trooper here, it's going to change all the variations of the Lizard Trooper. You'll also notice in this location a few of these values have negative on them, and that's because they're being used to damage the player. So like the Octobrain Scratch attack is using a value of -11. You'll also notice down here are some values for the different ammos that you can pick up. So as I said, most of this stuff in this file we don't need to mess with or edit. We've already moved most of the stuff off into our own separate con files of the stuff we're particularly interested in right now. Some of these other defines here are used, like this max stretch and minimum stretch is used for when you're use the shrinker gun on enemies, and in the code it utilizes to shrink them down. That's how it does that, or with the expander to expand them. And so some of this other stuff like swear frequency is how often you'll swear whenever you're taking damage and stuff like that. So we'll also notice down here, if you scroll down, we have a like shrunk count. That's also for the code for when you're shrunk down, how long you'll stay shrunk and stuff like that, or how long you stay frozen and drip after you've been frozen with the freeze thrower weapon. Something that is interesting down here is game startup. So we can organize each of these different strings of text so that they're one after another. It's a little easier to actually visualize what's going on with this. So let me just do that real quick. Okay, now I have those lined up the way I wanted to, and you can kind of see what they're doing a little better. So everything here obviously isn't being defined, so it's already been defined somewhere above this. So if I double click and highlight default visibility, you'll be able to see up here, as I scroll up, you'll find default visibility, and it's set to 512. And so that's actually how light or dark the shading in the game will be. Let's go ahead and see how that affects things. Let's go ahead and set the value here to 128. So I believe the lower this value is, the darker it should be in game. So now if I enter the first level, let me see. No, actually I was wrong. See, 128 is brighter than it was. So what we're going to look at is down there, that wall back there will be a lot darker if I change the value to a higher value. So let's go with twice that, 1024. So let's go ahead and put that there and launch the game. we'll see everything should be much darker. Okay, yeah. You could already, I think, tell. Usually you can't see flashing right here with us, I think. But yeah, see, much darker. You can notice that flash effect from the handgun much more prominently with the map this dark. So that's what that setting's doing. And so it's kind of somewhat odd that it was even bothered to be defined as default visibility up here, other than I guess you would know the string is called default visibility down here. Otherwise, this would just be set as 512, which would be a little confusing. You would understand that the startup, which is obviously something the Eduke32 exe is doing. It's calling up startup to check to see what all these values are supposed to be, and then applying that in the game. Um, so again, the only reason that we have a define for this up here is so that we have the word default visibility instead of just the number string that it uses, so that you can keep track of what this number is changing in the game, what it's reacting to. Um, the game startup is in a specific order here. If you change the order of these things, if I change the order of pistol ammo and shotgun ammo, then your pistol would have the amount of ammo shotgun has, and the shotgun would have the maximum ammo the pistol has, um, because the Eduke32 exe is calling up these strings of code in a specific order. It's expecting default visibility to be the first one. It's expecting generic impact damage to be the second. Through all of these, so just keep that in mind that these need to be in order. Obviously, most of these startup things are just radiuses to like the weapons or the amount of ammo the weapons have, number of bounces the freezer do. Um, you'll notice this define up here for camera destructibility or camera destructible has the word no instead of a string attached to it right here. That's because over here in the defs.con, you have define no as 0 and define yes as 1. And so this right here is just calling up this previous define and using the value that that define is, the value of 1 or 0. And so that's why this is using a string instead of a number. So let's go ahead and find all of the values that are being defined up here and move them and place them above game startup and in the order they exist in the game startup. You'll notice when you highlight a text, as you scroll through Notepad++, it will highlight other portions of text that are the same as that, so it makes it easier to find where the defines are. You could also hold down Control and scroll with your mouse wheel to change the size of the text you're seeing, so that not the actual text size, but zooming in on it, so you can see more lines of text at one time, and then you'll more easily be able to find the next one up. You might be able to find it without even having to scroll if you see enough at a time. Okay, now that we've moved all of these from their locations up here, whoop, scrolling a little bit. So we've moved all of the defines down here. These are the beginning of our defines we've moved and organized that are in the same order as the game startup. A few of these were in sections already, this being some generic stuff for your actor and visibility and stuff. This is the blast radiuses and then the ammo amounts and then a little bit of other stuff. So just kind of separated with spaces it out so it's a little easier to recognize down here as well. We're going to go ahead and copy game startup and make it a comment and put game startup defines, so we can know that these are our game startup defines up here and in the same order that they show up down here where the game startup shows, just to keep things a little more organized, a little more understandable. Down here we got define queue size. That's, as it says, total number of active bullet holes, blood, footprints, all that stuff. Max is 1024. I don't know if that's still the max in Eduke32, and I don't know if Eduke32 automatically allows more without having to change its value, but we're going to change it to its maximum of 1024, just because, make sure it's working, and, you know, there's not going to be very many computers that can't handle that at this point in time. Let's go ahead and go to our cons folder, create a new con file. Go ahead and name it Game Startup. Don't ask me why I like my cons capitalized. Okay, and then let's go ahead and copy all this text here. Let's not go too far. To Game Startup defines. Let's remove that from the user.con. Add that to our gamestartup.con. And then let's go to our game.con. And let's make the game startup the very first include, because there's no reason not to. That'll just mean it's the very first thing the game looks for, and it's the game startup, so it should be fine. Okay, let's go ahead and launch the game and make sure everything we've done so far is still working properly. And it's not. I've done something wrong. What have I done here? Respawn actor time is undefined. I'm including gamestartup.com, but I'm not including it in the right folder structure. Well, let's put the slash in the right place, and that was our problem. No, more problem. Let's see what I did here. An actor organic. Where is it? Sounds. Already defined. There's only one error. Those are warnings. Warnings won't crash it. The error is what's crashing it. Where's this error at? Why am I not seeing it? Where? Error. I'm seeing the words warning, but I'm not seeing the word error up here. My eye's not seeing it? Ugh. I load this over here. Still not seeing it specifically saying error. Include. I've got 2 warnings. Ah, there's the error. Why were my eyes not seeing that? My parameter yes is undefined. Okay. So line 39. Oh, okay, see that's what it is. There we go. I thought that I could go ahead and include game startup on the very top right here. But since one of them uses the word yes and defs.con is defining the word yes to 0 or yes to 1 and 0 no to 0, that was causing the error right there. So I did need to just load this after defs.con so that the game startup can now utilize the defs.con define of the word yes and no as 0 and 1. I'm gonna go ahead and leave this clip here because it kind of shows how you can run a no error and track it down. Even if I look kind of stupid for a minute there, I don't know why I couldn't just find that fucking word. Okay, now, after having moved the game startup below defs.con, it still throws an error. This error is being caused by max player health is undefined. That's because max player health, I just noticed, I was looking, is used a second time in the user.con. It's used to define the first aid amount, which would be 100. So we could just put 100 there. We'll see if that fixes it. And yeah, so max player health was only ever used that one other time right there. So rather than worrying about the organizational order of these things, since that's only being defined and used the 2 times for max player health and for first aid amount, we'll just set first aid amount to a specific value. I mean, they don't need to be attached to each other. First aid amount and max player health, they don't need to both be the same value as 100. I know that a large portion of the first aid kit is hard-coded the way it works, so changing this value to 100 instead of max player health, it should work. To test that and see if we're actually getting a change to it, since it is a hard-coded effect, go ahead and change that value there. Launch the game. and go ahead and give us all the items and see. Yeah, the value didn't change down there. It's still 100. So especially since it's being used as a percentage, you wouldn't want it to go above 100 to 150. That wouldn't make sense. So now we know that the first 8 amount right here, this value, isn't really being utilized. In one way or another, it may be that the code is trying to utilize it or utilizes it in some way, and it's just maybe we do have 150. Maybe it's only showing 100% there, but I don't know. I don't know enough about the source code or anything like that. We'll back that up back to 100 and not worry about it for now. We're just trying to keep the game from crash, organize everything, get comfortable with the situation of the files, the folders, all that before we start getting into actually modifying the game and adding our own custom content. This way we know where all the content needs to go and how the content interacts with each other to create the ultimate effect of the game. So far, the only defines we've removed from the defs.con are the defines we had for the sounds before. If I hit Control Z, you can see them appear there. So I still have that in the memory on this Notepad++. So let's go ahead and bring it back to where those are removed, and let's look at the rest of our defs.con and see what's going on up here. There's a few more defines here for different things. For whenever you're getting the steroids, these different and shields and other things, they're just defined to number values because these number values in the actual hard code of the exe would respond to the actual item, like the jetpack. And then we look in the game.con and hunt down one of these values like get jetpack. You'll see the actor jetpack, which is the actual jetpack you'd see laying on the ground. Let's go a little further than just saying that. Not only is this the jetpack you'd see on the ground, but we see the actor jetpack right there. That is also defined further up here. Jetpack. At define jetpack 57. This is defining the actual art tile that the jetpack exists on. So if we go to our tools folder and our edit art and open that, we'll see this window. You go back to your Eduke32 group folder we created with all the files in it. Go to your art tile and take your first art tile and drop it on this new window you have over here. So now you can see all the art from the game. You can see, after dropping just the one in there, all the art tiles that are in your folder here will show up in the list over here. So each of these art tiles can contain up to 256 tiles. It starts at tile 0 on this one and goes to 255, and then the next one starts at 256, and so forth to 511. This one starts at 512. Each of them will start like that. The Eduke32 exe automatically reads for tile 000 all the way through to, I'm not exactly sure what the maximum number of tiles there are. There's 3 digits here, so we could assume 999. Could probably be wrong, I don't know. I have to ask people who programmed the source code for this. So let's get back to what we were talking about, the jetpack right now. It is on tile 57 of the art tile 000.art slot 57, tile 57. So right here, this is defining jetpack as 57. That's for the defines. The defs.con here is what allows the game to know, to have a word attached to. Oh, you know what? I have my other window off screen right now. Make sure I keep this on screen. Got a lot of extra screen space over here. This is an ultra wide monitor, and you're only seeing a normal size screen portion of it. So anyway, back to on point. The jetpack is defined at tile 57. The word jetpack is defined to tile 57 here, and tile 57 is our jetpack image. And then in our code over here at game.con, actor jetpack, because the word jetpack here is being defined and the word jetpack here is being used, And because the jetpack is being set to slot 57, and slot 57 is our image right here, that's how the game is applying this image in game. It knows that this picture has this code attached to it. So when you're playing the game, it'll do all this. So I'll talk a little bit about what the code does here. Fall, that's just going to make it fall to the ground. So let's actually go ahead and also, let's go ahead and incorporate the build editor into our work folder now. So we'll go to our workstation folder where we had placed Eduke32, the zip file that we had downloaded from their webpage. Go ahead and get mapster32 and names.h and place them in your Eduke32 folder. Now, when we go in here, the importance of names.h, you can open this with any regular text editor. So let's go to edit with Notepad++, so we can view it. We'll see that it is just kind of a mirror of our defs.con. As a matter of fact, I'm not 100% positive on this, but I believe that it is the kind of internal source codes version of the defs.con. Matter of fact, I think whenever I was gonna say whenever the Eduke32 exe generates a con files, because if you don't have them, it can generate them. I was thinking to myself, maybe it uses that names.h to generate it, but I'm pretty sure I'm wrong on that. I believe I actually just recently read that that's actually what this Eduke3D.bin contains, is compiled versions of the con files. So back on point. This file right here you want to keep in your folder with Mapster32, because that's how Mapster32, when you launch it, we'll go ahead and launch it. That's how it knows when you're looking at it. I need to build a structure so I can go to 3D mode, and then we can look at the tile sheet from there. In its tile sheet here, you can see on the bottom right hand corner where my mouse is now, you can see the name of things: jetpack, steroids, air tank. It's getting that information from the names.h file there. Also, if you were, when you're making your custom total conversion and you're doing your own defines to define specific tiles that you want to have new code attached to it, you'll probably want to make a file as well mirroring that named names.h, so that when you're in Mapster, you'll have these names in the bottom right corner. It's not 100% necessary, but it's just nice to know what things are named, particularly because this is also useful in that's not a sprite right there, that's a floor texture, so make it a sprite. I'll explain the build editor later in a separate video series. So if we go to back to the 2D mode and we're seeing from above, you can see that this sprite is using its names from names.h to be viewed from the top-down view you have here. You can push backspace to view the textures for things and also the sprites tile, so you can actually see the sprite itself from a top-down view as you're building your maps. But it's nice to have the word phrasing there, also because when you're building maps later on, your sector effectors and such that are important also will be more convenient if they're named. So that's the importance of the names.h file and the Mapster32 file existing in the same folder. Okay, so we can close out of that. We don't need this open anymore either. No. We can close out of this as well. We've done what we needed to and placed it where we wanted it, I believe. Let me make sure I'm not overlooking anything or making any mistakes. Is the game launching right now? Yeah. Okay. So yes, we're definitely still in a good state. We haven't made any problems or mistakes for ourselves. We want to try to do that regularly, because if you move too many steps ahead of yourself when you're doing things and you haven't tested the game, especially if you're just rearranging things or you're doing a lot of weird work like that, you want to know when you caused the problem. You don't want to move a bunch of steps ahead and then have it crash. Even though it's usually not too hard to identify the crash, you have the log file, you could find the line of code you're probably making a mistake on. I just like to launch regularly while I'm doing this kind of stuff, make sure everything's still working. Anyway, back on point. We were talking about the jetpack here, and we originally started talking about we're talking here, we're the user.con. There's inventory amounts. No, it was the defs.con, was it not? Yes, down here in the defs.con, we were talking about these get jetpack for. So the get jetpack that is here in the game code for this get jetpack, uh, if player inventory, add inventory. So the exe itself has some built-in source, hard coded stuff, and the hard coded thing would be the add inventory is hard coded to add the inventory item based on the numbers and the internal numbers that the exe and the source code use, which would be 0 for steroids, 1 for shield, 2 for scuba, 3 for, obviously you can see in order here. So this define right here for define get jetpack to being defined to the number value 4 is there so that when the game code calls up add inventory, it is adding the inventory item jetpack to get jetpack. So that's just telling it utilize the value 4, and so you get a jetpack. If I were to change that value right here in the code to the number 4, it would act the same in game. I'd still get the jetpack because the code in the game.con is asking the exe to add inventory number 4. And so right now our code's saying get jetpack because that has been defined as the number 4. So I hope you could follow through on that last section easily enough. I kind of went off topic a little bit, mentioning how the actor was created up here through the defines and the tiles in the build editor. I'll try to stay more on point with everything. And so what's happening right here under player actions with the defines is it's defining certain hard-coded effects to word values here, word strings, to be used in your game.con to build your enemy AI. This allows the enemy AI to know what state the player's in. So if we look at like player hire right here, this is going to be utilized in some of the code for the actors that can fly. And so it could be used for a lot of other purposes, but this is the trooper code right here. We have the trooper seek state, so trooper code for him looking for your player. And so right here the code, excuse me, right here the code is basically the actor for the trooper is asking the exe, it's asking the code, if player is player higher. So if the player's Z value is higher than the actor, this enemy's Z value, that's how it knows that. And the internal value in the hard-coded Eduke32 exe here, the value for it, for your player being higher than them is the number 64. But again, because seeing just numbers all throughout our code here is going to be confusing, we've defined that value 64 to the word string p higher, so that as we develop our code for making actors, we could then check to see if the player is higher than us. So if player p higher, player higher. So that's a little bit about why you see these defines here, and these defines are directly associated with hard-coded strings, hard-coded, not strings per se, but hard-coded numbers in the exe that can then tell it, the actor, how to interact with your player or what your player's doing. Like p dead, you can have your actors set up so that if p dead, AI equals 0, and then all of your actors in your game, as soon as the player dies, would stop walking around and trying to do anything, stuff like that. So if we scroll up a little bit from here, we'll see that right up here before these tile positions are reserved, everything below this, I believe it looks to me that is attached to source code values and things. And so in your total conversion, you wouldn't really want to change any of this stuff here, particularly unless you're getting deeper into understanding Eduke32 and how to manipulate things that are source coded. Because of the extensive efforts done by the people developing the source port, you don't actually have to edit the source code yourself. Almost all of that is available through uh, extended con code scripting that is built into Eduke32. That is what makes Eduke32 better than the original DOS version. Well, obviously it's better than the original DOS version. You can play it on your Windows operating system, but also it's better because of all the extensive efforts done to make the con system much more versatile. So if we scroll up here, as I'd mentioned earlier, up here we see all of our defines that define a name string, a text string to our actual tiles that exist on our tile sheet. And that's how we can actually attach any kind of programming to those specific tiles. If you scroll through here and look at, actually you wouldn't be able to see it right here because this is our art file viewer. But if you look in the Mapster and actually get into a map, I have to make a box real quick. I'm just using spacebar to make those exterior lines there. If you look at the tile sheet here, um, a lot of this art doesn't have any name strings attached to it, and that's because it has no programming attached to it. It is just strictly there to be used as artwork, a tile on a wall. And so basically everything you see here that does have a name string down there, like screen break 5, that's got some kind of source coded effect attached to it. A lot of them, it turns out. One way you can tell what tiles do and do not have any source coded effects attached to them is if you go to your game.con. Below your includes that are necessary. Some of this stuff up here is definitely necessary for the game to launch. It'll crash without it, but everything down here that's actually in the game.con, all this code is here, is just information being attached to these tiles that are named in the defs.con. And you could go ahead and, if you do like I said before, I've selected right here above all of the code here. If I scroll down past all of the code and hold Shift and Alt and select down the column here, I've selected past all of the code in the game.con. And if I do 2 slashes, I've commented it all out. And that means that there's no soft coding going on in the game really from here. None of the tiles that have any programming attached to them to tell them what to do will have any of that programming attached to them right now. None of the fire won't run through its animations. The actors, they won't work, they won't act, they won't move around. That's turned off. So if we launch the game from here, what we'll notice is that a lot of things are still working, obviously. So that is due to the fact that I have to turn the sound off. I can hear it a lot louder than you can. So because we've disabled all of that code, when we launch the game, we'll notice that half of the things are still working. So now that we've disabled all the code in the game.con, we can see that any of the code that's still running is running from the source code and from the exe itself directly. So some of the effects, as you saw the Duke car flying through the air, still flew through the air, and the effect behind it, though, the explosion, didn't finish its animation, so it's soft coded. Play the animation there. You'll notice these, if shot, they still blow up, and so they're hard coded to detect being impacted by the gun. The gun itself firing its animation off and firing a projectile out. That's hard coded effects here. This stuff can, at this point, be edited through Eduke32, through specific Eduke32 commands. But the original Nukem 3D exe wouldn't allow any of the hard-coded effects to be modified without actually getting into the source code. Luckily, we don't have to worry about that anymore. You don't have to access the source code to be able to make edits to it. Most all that has been made available through the con editing. So you'll notice other effects that also work, like the blood popping out of this enemy. So as you're making a total conversion, if you were to move all of your enemies to new tiles and not use these locations, and then you were to put a texture on this location, now more specifically if it were made as, I guess, a sprite and a location, it would still produce blood if you shot it, like even if it was that signpost because of the hard coding. So as you're running through the game, or as you're moving through making a total conversion for the game, you'll want to either avoid hard coded tiles or make something on that tile that does the same thing. So if you have a tile that's already hard coded to be like an object like this that breaks when you shoot it or whatever, if you hard code that to another object that looks very similar or is the exact same, then obviously everything will match up, and so it'll work for you that way. Uh, so you just want to keep that in mind, that there's a lot of hard coded things that you'll have to figure out how to deal with and how to either work around or modify and manipulate it with advanced Eduke32 con coding. A lot of stuff you can do. So I haven't gotten all the way that far into it. I kind of know how to do basically everything in the game that has to do with manipulating or adding new files in, but not everything that has to do with the code or why things interact with each other. So let's go ahead and uncomment out our game.con code here and save that so that it's working for us properly again. And we'll move up on this, and I'm actually going to pause the video again and think about what I want to move into next. Okay, so I think the next thing I want to move into is relatively simple and similar to what we've been doing so far, and that is moving all of the actor code into their own individual con files so that they're easier to work with, or just to understand and see them separated. So we'll go ahead and have a new folder in our cons folder. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and make sure we're gonna scroll down. There's some of these actors, the new ones that are added by the Atomic Edition. They use a user actor instead of just actor, because that was required to add new actors to the game on the original Duke Nukem 3D exe, because I guess it only had a amount of actor slots that the amount of enemies there were in the original game. You'd have to replace an enemy, and then when that expansion came out, they had added their own extra enemies and then incorporated the ability to make more actors. I'm not sure if I'm remembering exactly about the history of that and if the previous version of Duke Nukem didn't allow you to add multiple actors, but it seems like I remember that from a long time in the past. Anyway, that's why you'll see that some of the actors are user actors. So we're going to go ahead and look at our user actor name as NewBeast for the last one right here, and so we can make a new con here, new text document named newbeast.con. Yes, we want to save that extension, and we're going to select its code all the way up. We're going to move all the way up to the actions we'll see up here. We'll see some AI, some moves right here that have to do with the speed it moves during certain AI sequences. And then further above that, we'll see these actions right here. And all of those actions for the newbies, that's where the actor starts. These actions are what define the actor's tile locations, and what animations play and what order and such. So after we have all of these actors separated off into their own folders, we'll learn more about how to create actors and manipulate some of them. So we'll go ahead and put that code there and make a include. Make sure I'm spelling things right. Yeah, we just want to include newbeast.con, but we want to make sure we utilize, we've got a directory structure here, so we've got it down in cons and enemies, so we want to include that in front of it. And so now we have that saved. make sure the actor still launches in the game. So if you want to test an actor, instead of having to go to a level and find or whatever, you can type spawn, and then you can type the name of the actor, or you could type directly the tile number that that actor exists on, because the define is defining the name to the tile number, so they're both equal in the EXE's mind. So yeah, there's our newbie actor, and he's jumping and moving and working as he properly should, with his code moved over as we wanted it. So it's nice to have all of your actors' codes separated into their own separate location, so that when you want to work on them, you can work on a specific one and really easily find it. Or whenever you're working on one and you come into an error for whatever reason, you'll know specifically what file your error is coming from, not just a line of code, but a line within a specific file. So sometimes that'll be easier just to track down your errors, as long as you understand your directory structure and know how and where to find everything. But it's all relatively simple. So if you don't actually want to package this stuff up yourself into separate con files, I think I'll go ahead and do that with everything and release that with the video, so that you'll have a version of it already all split up if you want to just look at it that way. And just having reviewed the video will give you an idea about how all the actors work. Actually, I'm having a little bit of trouble here finding the separation between the actors. Well, I'll get back to it and keep splitting this up. Pause the video for now. Okay, so we'll notice up here above the tank enemy, it actually defines tank strength right here as 500. So they actually added that define in right here with the actor, rather than it being in the user.con or defs.con as many of the other values have been. So to make things a little more rapid as I do move through this, if I just copy this directory structure and the include here, go ahead and paste that a bunch of times, so that I'll be making a bunch of enemy con files anyway. Then I could more easily just add straight to the end of that the name of the con file as I'm making them real quick. You can also create yourself a new con.con file and just copy that a bunch of times, and you'll just be renaming it, so it doesn't matter how many times it's calling itself copy. This way you won't run into that error where it's telling you you're changing the extension every time. You'll just have a bunch of con files you can start working with. So a few of the things we have down here: a lava bubble, a speaker broke, hot meat, a few other items. They're not enemies. We don't need to move those. We're not gonna bother with this cannon thing either, even though it's like an enemy. I guess the way it's set up. Yeah, we don't need to worry about any of that crap. Let's see. I think we're at commander actor. Yeah, some of this code down here is also for the commander actor. End actor right here. Okay, so now we're above that code. So there's this chunk of code right here. There's a little bit of code here for some actors and stuff that aren't enemies, or if they're enemies, they're just weird things that I'm not going to bother putting in my enemies folder. So okay, I just finished putting all the actors' codes in their own con files, and so here we are. This is the piece of code that was right before the actor code. This piece of code, state RF, that stands for random flip. This piece of code randomly flips the enemy's dead sprite for when they're dead, back and flips it one way or the other, left or right, so that there's variance in the dead bodies throughout the levels. So anyway, a little bit above this, there's another actor. We're not going to bother copying or making an actor out of this. This guy's I don't think ever even used in the game, and it was just left in there but put aside and scrapped. Anyway, this up above that one, this actor right here, this is actually the player actor. And so this is what attaches the different graphics to what actions you're doing as a player. So if you go in front of a mirror and jump, this is what'll tell it what images to show you as a character jumping. These actions right here specifically are the ones that show that. So we're going to copy that code as well. This is also a little bit of part of Nukem code, Nukem player code, as well as these standard p jibs or player jibs, and his actor is going to need those jibs. So I believe that's all of that actor there. So we're going to copy that, remove it, and go ahead and throw it in this con file, and then rename it a player. And now I don't need this con file, it's empty. It's the one I made, so I can make a bunch of duplicates easily. We'll remove that, and this is all the enemies. I believe I've found them all. This is all the enemies and the player's code here. Now, I already have a few of these added, but I'm gonna go ahead and remove those ones I have added so far, because I'm gonna show. You can select all of these right here, holding Shift. I believe it's Shift on your keyboard and right click, and you could say copy as path. You do that, and now if you paste it over here in this window, you'll notice it's pasting it with the path of it, the directory structure basically. Now, since we want all of these files and these directories right here to be an include, what we can do is click above that where it says con, holding Shift and Alt, could select again down the column, and actually no, we don't need to. Well, yeah, we do need to select down the column, but we don't want it. Well, not the column, but hold Shift and Alt and select right here. From the bottom right here, I have it selected to up here. This will select all of that text up through this column and back. So go ahead and kick all that off. And we don't need this code either. So you could also hold Shift and Alt, click down here, you can get that code off. Now, we don't need all of these. We just need the word include once. Copy that to your clipboard. Okay, and you can backspace on that. And go here and then again, select by the column, Shift, Alt, and click. Now when I paste, it's going to paste the word include. And a bunch of spaces, because I had spaces selected down there. Otherwise, it would have kind of left the cursor where I wanted it. Either way, it pasted the word include in front of all of those, and then now you just need to put a space there, and then also that you need to remove that from the end of all of them for the formatting. That's not supposed to be there. But anyway, that was a quick example of how if you want a bunch of files in a folder right here, really rapidly having an include in front of them and having the directory structure, you just select them, hold Shift, right click, copy path, paste the path, click in front of the word con there, Shift Alt, remove that, copy the word include, Shift Alt right there, paste the word include, put your cursor where you want it again, space, remove all those off the end real quick, and there. That's how quickly you can put a bunch of con files that you have in a folder and include them in something. You just drop them down and using Shift and using copy and paste, you can format it pretty rapidly. So now if I've done everything properly right here, this will work, except for something's wrong right here, and that is the A player. The A player is in the middle of these. He wasn't before. Now, the reason this matters is, and I've run into this before because I've done some similar stuff like this, got all those saved. Okay, if I start the game, it's gonna crash, and that's because a lot of these actors are requiring on a piece of code in the A player, or maybe it's right above the A player, that is just some blood effect that makes it to where I think whenever you shoot an enemy, the blood will spray out of them and onto a wall behind them, and it also happens for you when you get hit, or in multiplayer when you hit another player. And I believe it's that piece of code that's being stated in the A player or right around or above him. And if it's not in the right order, these guys are all gonna crash and they're gonna complain. And so now the game should launch. Now it didn't. So I got one error still. I messed something up somewhere. So let's see if we can't find where that error is. Error parameter alias get enemy undefined. See, the Octobrain code has a parameter alias get enemy. I'm not positive why the Octobrain has that in it, but that means that the Octobrain is also reliant on the order it's placed right here. If the Octobrain is placed, I guess, above the Liz enemy, he's not going to have a piece of code he needs. So right there, we see that we're having this error on line 145 of the Octobrain con. Okay, and so we're just going to move the Octobrain con right here and the include of it below the rest of them. And now whatever code is existing in these other actors will be available for him to use. We'll save that. We'll launch the game, see if it launches. And yes, we are having no more problems. So that's it. I believe they're all working. I could spawn them all up in order right now, but I really don't feel like it. I'll just spawn boss 3 and die real quick. Yep, that worked. Let's God. And let's get away from that bastard. Yep. So I'm assuming they all worked, since it was just a really simple thing to do, copy and pasting and creating a folder structure and linking it all together. And again, I've said this once before, I believe, but all of this has been relatively simple stuff. I haven't moved into the actual creating of content for a total conversion. The next steps I'd move into is to talk about where these actors directly associate themselves with the tiles they're on, and also believe the next video I'll probably talk about how to soon I'll talk about how to create your own custom tiles and how to utilize the original palette. That's the word I'm looking for, the palette. The game's relying on a palette, so you can only use a specific set amount of colors, unless you're using high tiles, which are just high definition tiles, which is Eduke32 specific stuff. Right now, I'm basically sticking to all things you can do with the original game. Basically, well, not exactly. I think all these directory structures. I'm not sure if the original Eduke32 or not Eduke32, the original Duke Nukem 32.exe. I don't think it could handle that, but nobody's using that anymore, so who cares, right? I just realized that I also need to move the egg actor. I was scrolling up a minute ago, notice his code's right here. So we'll grab that real quick and make a separate con out of that, and I believe that's all the actors that I wanted to make cons out of. So something I'll mention right now that I've moved the egg.con or created an egg.con of the egg actor is that the actor the egg spawns, the little slime that crawls around, it is actually a fully hard-coded actor, and you won't find any code for it here in the code or here in the game.con. And also that actor would still move around and do what it can do when you disable all the code in the game.con. It's one of those things that still trigger from the source code. So now that we have made a bunch of separate con files out of all of the actors, the amount of code left to actually sift through is a little more easily handleable. There's just not so many damn lines of code you have to worry about. You can start to figure out what's going on up here a little easier. Here's the shark actor. We could move the shark actor to a new location if we wanted to. I don't think I'm gonna worry about moving anything around more than this, than just putting the enemies aside as I have. Mostly this was all just shown as an example. But you know, you could obviously go to extremes if you wanted to go OCD with it by putting all the different effects, the different breakable objects and all that stuff in their own separate folder for like a folder named clutter, folder named for whatever types of items you want to have. Another reason I wouldn't want to bother trying to make separations of the rest of the stuff in the game .con here is it gets a lot more tough to avoid breaking things by accidentally putting things out of order because of the way there's a lot more states going on that are reused and repurposed throughout the code up here. The actor codes don't have a lot of restating stuff that was further up in the code. They're pretty self-contained. So I just mostly probably leave most of this stuff alone and later on when I'm explaining how to create new actors, we can explain how to put the code together to make that happen. What you notice here with this state break object, uh, it's actually a bunch of different actors built into one piece of code here. It looks like the way it works, so that depending on when all the objects that are calling this state are also like using code to determine if actor, which actor they are, and then what guts they'll produce, or what, if they'll produce glass when they break, or if they'll produce what looks like food gibs and stuff. So there's a lot of weird stuff sometimes that's going on like that, where one state is combined to a bunch of different actors here. And so moving those actors or trying to change anything else around, it could get a bit difficult. You can get to the point where you're just in a tangled web of junk. It can get like that sometimes. I guess this is as good a point as any to conclude my first video. At this point, we haven't done anything particularly interesting, but we've organized things in a way where we can better implement our own assets into the game. We could also start doing a few things. We can clean up some of the directories, removing things that are unnecessary. I believe these are the only, 5 items that are unnecessary. We can go and remove those. And these animations already exist in the group file, and since we're already loading the group file and then our files are loading over top of that, we don't really need these animations here. I don't believe the animations are defined in any location in the devs or users or game. I think those are hard-coded to play at times. You could use Eduke32 specific coding to affect when they play, or if they play, or to play a different animation instead of them. So just for the sake of cleaning up our directory here, since we don't need these, we'll go ahead and delete all of these animation files. Alternatively, you could just put them in a separate folder, but either way, it doesn't really matter. Just get them out of the way. So the next video will be about actors and the tiles, and how the actors associate with the tiles, and how you get some of the code to work on them. I'm not too familiar with how to build actors. I've done it, but it's been a bunch of Frankenstein coding where I can cut out snippets of things here and there and put it all together and make an actor work. But I haven't ever truly built an actor from the ground up. So what I'll probably do is just dissect one of the actors that exists, probably the pig cop, and then re-put them back together, following a few standards that I would prefer when building my own personal actors that help keep things a little more organized looking and a little more straightforward in my mind and in my thinking process of how I'm setting the character up. Particularly the order of the frames and the graphics and in the tile itself. So I'll show you what I mean by that whenever I get to the next video. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I guess I should tell you to comment and subscribe and upvote it. It's always annoying when people do that, but it is important. It's the only way people can monetize their efforts, and time is money, and it took me time to make this. Thank you for watching and listening.